Hello and welcome to another video. In this one we're going to talk about the Z1 Designer and several of the tools that are pivotal in creating your dashboard. In a previous video we discussed the geometry tools, things like the rectangles and the circles, so you definitely go check that out because that's important in how you create sort of the background of your dashboard. But in this video we're going to talk about the information that actually changes on your dashboard. So that would be the data channels, the conditional text, things like units, LEDs, graphs, and also how you place just general text in your dashboard. So first up is the data channel tool. So I have a new blank dashboard here, and I want to put a data channel on that dashboard. So a data channel is basically anything that is data about the car. So that could be a gear, it could be your RPM, your speed, anything like that. If you want to place the information on your dashboard, you choose the data channel tool right here. And you also want to make sure that this is placed in the foreground, because remember, foreground objects are things that will change and your data channel information will definitely change. If you accidentally place it in the background, then you either need to drag it to the foreground or the information will just be static and your dashboard isn't going to work properly. So I've selected the foreground. I've selected my data tool, and I'm going to drag out a square to place information in. So to start with, if I look over here at the object properties, all data channels start off by just being the gear. And this channel drop-down right here allows me to choose what is displayed. So you have a list of all the data channels available, and there are a lot. There's over 100 of them, I think. So if gear is what you want, then that's great. You leave it as gear. But say you want to display something else. Let's say you want to display the RPM of the car. You go down here, find RPM, and you choose the RPM channel. And then up here, this changes to an RPM display. You might also want to change then your display name from gear to RPM. That might make more sense, especially when it shows up down here in the layers. You want to know what data channel is being displayed. So after you've chosen what information you want to display, your next options are what color you want it to be and how many decimal places. So the default color is yellow. If you want to change that, you just click on the color swatch and choose a different color. So let's say you want green, just choose green, and now your data channel information will show up in green. Decimal places doesn't really make sense for RPM, but if you've chosen something else, so let's say you've chosen lateral acceleration, decimal places for that might make sense. So instead of just having 1G, you could have the exact number it is. So 2 decimal places here gives you 0.60. And as you see, if you do 0, it just rounds. So that's really not very useful. So decimal places gives you more accuracy for those data channels that require it. And you can choose how you do that for each individual data channel. We have our standard box XYs right here, and obviously as you move around, those will change. I'm not going to go over them because we talked about them in our previous video on geometric shapes, and they work exactly the same way. The last part then is how you want it to display. So you can choose any font that your system supports. Just click on the drop down and choose something else. And then you can choose the font size. You can make this as big or as small as you want. And the weight of the font, which is basically, the boldness of it. And this does depend a bit on the font you've chosen. Not all fonts will have all the weights available, but you can experiment and see what works for your dashboard. And then the style, which is basically just normal or italic and oblique. Again, not all fonts have all these styles, but you can choose one that works for you. And then the text align, leading, trailing, centered, or justified. So if you want to center it within that square you created, you would choose center for both the text and the paragraph. And again, the style of the font also has an effect on how the centering or the alignment works based on the heights and things like that of that font. So I can place as many of these data channels as I want. And if I want to have this one as gear, and I'm going to make it bigger so I can see my gear. I should make it for gear, let's go really big. And if you go really big like that and it goes outside of the bounding box, that's okay. But the bounding box, really you want it to be a bit bigger than whatever you're displaying. And again, if I want another one, let's say I want speed, and I'll choose my speed right here. And I'll make that a bit bigger too. Okay, so that is how the data channel works. Probably the most important tool in the toolbox, because without it you have no information about your car. So let's talk about the text tool. That's the T here. This allows you to draw any text you want on your dashboard design. So as we added several data channels, we might want to label what they are. So we would choose our text tool, and let's say under here we are just going to draw out the rectangle, and we're going to change this text to say gear. So on our object properties, the text that is displayed is right here in the text field. How many times can we say text? I'm going to type in gear, and I'm going to use the centered option to center it in my text box underneath the gear I chose. And I'm going to change the color. Let's go with red for no particular reason. And then we'll make this a little bit bigger. Let's say it's a 14. And also, over here I created this in the foreground. Text actually is better to put in the background, so I'm just going to drag this over to the background, because the word in my text display will never change. So when I create my text boxes, if you put them in the background, that is the preferable place to put them. And I can have a text box anywhere I want, displaying anything I want. So my dashboard or whatever I want to display. And again, you can choose any font you want of the ones that are available on your computer. So that's how the text box works. I guess the key thing on that is make sure you put them in the background and not in the foreground. And you can use them to display whatever text you want in your dashboard. So now we're going to talk about the LED tool. That's this one here. It looks kind of like a sun or a light bulb. So you select this one, and you want to make sure that the LEDs are created in the foreground, because they definitely change. And if you put them in the background, they won't work properly. So I'm just going to click and drag out to place one. And over here in the object properties, the LED type, this allows me to say what this LED should be for. So I have up to 15 shift lights I can choose, and I can choose whichever one I want, shift light number 1, 2, etc. all the way down. Or I can have it be a left warning light or a right warning light. So the type that you choose here actually corresponds in the dashboard software to the 15 shift lights, and the first one usually is on the left, but you don't need to put it there. And the left warnings are usually down the left side, 1, 2, 3, and the right warnings down the right side, 1, 2, 3. The user of the dashboard can assign the left warning and the right warning to be whatever they want. So if you create a left warning light, that means this one will now illuminate when the option that the user has chosen in the dashboard happens. So say they assign this to be a yellow flag for the left warning one, this will illuminate when a yellow flag happens. Now say you make it a shift light, so now it's assigned to shift light number 1. That means this will illuminate when the RPM reaches whatever value is assigned for that dashboard in the sim, in the user's Z1 dashboard. So basically you're not necessarily specifying exactly when these should come on, you are specifying where they should be and which action they take on. So a shift light or a left or a right warning light. And like other things, they have a color, so I can change the color. So say I want it to be more of a red, I can choose that. And now I have a red light. And I also have an off color. So the off color is what you see when the light is not illuminated. So if I want to see that, I can uncheck this checkbox here. And so this is what my shift light is going to look like when it's not on. And if I want to change to something else, I can do that. Or if I want it to just be completely invisible, I can click this little X box here, and then when it's off, I won't see anything. and then when it's on, it will look like this. So depending on what you want your dashboard design to look like with your shift lights, you can choose the colors and the transparency of the off version to meet your needs with your dashboard design. And then down here you just have the center and the radius, which allows you to specify things exactly if you want, or like any other object, you can just adjust it by clicking and dragging it and moving it around. So with shift lights, there is also a window up here, dashboard shift lights. So let's just bring this up. So this allows you to specify what you think are the most optimal RPM values for your shift lights. So as we mentioned before, the user of the dashboard can override these and put their own in. But if you provide these of what you think the optimal is, then they can use that if they want to. So right now, since I've only added one shift light, I can only enter one shift light value here. And right now, this one will illuminate by default at 20,000. That's probably too high. So if we change this to something like, 2,000, that's probably much better. And if I add some more shift lights, just randomly in some completely bizarre dashboard design, now I have the 5 shift light values. And so I could specify these. So here, let's say 4,000. Let's say this one turns on at 6,000 and 8,000 and then 10,000. So now when someone uses your dashboard design, those values will be the default RPM values for when your shift lights will illuminate. And you have all the standard options. You can set it manually, which we're doing here, or you can choose any of these automatically set ones that the dashboard will decide when they turn on. And then this checkbox, if you uncheck that, it allows you to set the RPM values for every single gear within the 8 gears, reverse and neutral, that the dashboard currently supports. So next up is the units tool, this C/F right here. So if we click and drag out, we're placing one of the optional units on your dashboard. So what you can place for this is amount, distance, fuel amount, fuel mileage, pressure, speed, and temperature. So what this means is right now speed is chosen by default and it shows miles per hour. The units displayed here, so miles per hour or kilometers per hour, actually depend on what the user of the dashboard has chosen in their setup. So if they have metric, this will actually show kilometers. If they have imperial, it shows miles per hour. And if I change this to amount, the same thing. It will be gallons or liters, depending on what they've chosen. If I choose temperature, it will be, it's actually an F, it's hard to see because it's small. Okay, it's Fahrenheit or Celsius, depending on what they've chosen. So the units tool allows you to have a dashboard which then shows the correct units for whatever the data channel is. So right now I have 35, which is in miles per hour if you're using imperial, or kilometers per hour if you're using metric. But you're not going to know that when you're designing your dashboard. So the units tool comes into play here. So I can put this here. I'm going to set it as speed. And now in my dashboard, this will say 35 miles per hour if the user is using miles per hour. If they have chosen kilometers, then this will say 35 kilometers per hour. So the units tool is really useful to be able to choose, to be able to place text that changes based on what the user has chosen as their units for various options. And again, you have all your standard features here. You can choose the color. You can choose the font, the size, and all the standard font tools. Okay, so now let's talk about the graph tool. I'm actually going to delete that object right there. So the graph tool is basically a rectangle, and we're going to use this to display a graph of a data channel. So this will be useful for things like an RPM bar or something like that. You could also display speed in here or any of the data channels you want. And over here on the object properties, this is where you choose what is getting displayed. So I can have RPM, or I could have speed, or like I said, anything. It could be throttle, it could be any of the data channels you want that makes sense for your design. And then the graph color, this is what is filled up as the RPM moves. And then, so if I change this, so let's go with a blue. So now I have a blue bar. And then the stroke color, if you want the graph to be outlined, you can choose a color here. So if we go, say, for a light blue, we have a lighter blue. Or you can have nothing by choosing the stroke color to be transparent. So, but let's actually put the color back in. So then we also have orientation. So how do you want your graph to go? So it can go from the left to the right, or you can go from right to left, top to bottom, or bottom to top. So based on your design, you would choose the appropriate orientation that makes sense for how you want your graph to progress as the data channel you've selected changes. And then we have our standard X and Y locations. Don't need to talk about those again. The start value and the end value. So this means, let me just change this back to left to right. This means that the start value of 1,000 is what is right here on the left side, and the end value of 8,000 is right here. So as this is RPM, if the RPM is 1,000 or less, you won't see anything. And as it grows to 8,000, which is completely full, then the graph would be all the way up to here. And if it goes beyond 8,000, then it would just be a completely full graph. So you want to make sure the start value and the end value make sense for whatever you're showing. For example, if this was a speed graph, it would make no sense for 1,000 and 8,000 because your speed is just going to be off the charts then. You'd want this to be something like 0 through 100 or 200 or whatever it is would make sense for the car you're driving. And then finally we have stroke width, which is standard stroke width. You can make this whatever you want, and it's the outline of the bar, and it relates to the stroke color here. So if you make that transparent, then the stroke width doesn't do anything because there's nothing to display. So the graph tool is a great way of displaying RPM bars, speed bars, and things like that within your dashboard. So hopefully this has been a useful video. We're going to do another one on some more tools, the widgets tool and the warning tool. Both those are very important for designing your dashboards, and they definitely deserve their own video on how they work and what they do for your dashboard. So make sure you download the Z1 Designer and the Z1 Dashboard at www.z1dashboard.com. Like the video. If you have questions or comments, please put them below, and we'll see you in the next video.